Okay. Hey, everybody. So I am thrilled, probably personally, because I really like this person, but I also think he has a lot of really interesting things to share with this group. And I thought of him when we were thinking about this seminar, just because I think he brings an interesting perspective, and he's sympathetic to those of us who work in the academic spaces, because he had this role and worked. You're still an adjunct at the University of Arkansas. So Aaron Shew is the Chief Technology Officer of Acres. Cool thing about Acres, not only is it a really cool company, but they have these academic partnerships, of which we have a really unique relationship with them. So without much more introduction, I'm going to let Aaron, who you may find out that he may be a CIA asset. Hopefully we don't post that online. You should ask him about how many languages he speaks, where he's lived, and kind of like what his history is, if you have some time. With that, Aaron.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you. Yeah, I have a varied background. Started most of my career in ag development. Spent over 5 years in various places around the world, most of the places that are harder to live, not Europe. So did that, ended up in grad school, did my PhD primarily in ag econ, but it did a fair amount of geospatial work. So satellite remote sensing, GIS and data science. Became a professor. I was the R.E.L. Wilson Chair of Ag Econ at Arkansas State University for about 4 years, and then I jumped back over to University of Arkansas for really a year as a professor in Ag Econ and Associate Director of the Center for Advanced Spatial Technologies. When I happened to meet this company, back then, AcreTrader, farmland investment firm, still exists, and they were evaluating building a new software platform. They were going to call it Acre Maps. That was our original name. And they asked me if I'd come and help build it. And I said no originally. Put a lot of time into becoming an academic and was making progress. But about 6 months later, I went back to, I was like, if there's a way to what if I just do this as a consultant? I'm just going to come in for 6 months. I'll help you build a data team. And which is really what their interest was at that time. And so I started out, and then within 3 months, I was like, man, I love these people. This is a really cool business. And I took a pretty massive leap of faith and joined this early stage startup to build what is now Acres. And that was 4 years ago in November. So it's been a wild ride since then. As Chad mentioned, I'm very much still involved in academia. I'm an adjunct professor at U of A. I advise students still. I also publish papers and whatnot. So I still have a foot in that world, and we really get a lot out of our academic partnerships, and it's pretty unique. I don't think many companies value it in the way that we do. But so we share data, and with that data, we collaborate on what we think are interesting, longer term problems that I can't really give my teams time to. There's not enough value for us as an early stage business that just has to get revenue in the door for me to go solve those problems. And so this partnership with the Center for Commercial Ag has been a really great way for me to continue some of those deeper questions and keeping up with some methods and other things on this side. So very excited to be here. And I did frame the talk today quite different. So we're not going to talk a lot about data science. We do very little of that actually at Acres. And so I wanted to talk more about the strategy around building a data business or building a software business and what it really takes to go from, hey, I have an idea on a Google Doc to, hey, we make millions and millions of dollars revenue a year now, and we have a team of 65 people. And how do you keep all of that running? So I called it the marginal dollar, driving prop tech strategy for land. We are pretty far outside of just ag now, and I'll talk more about that as we go here. So our mission is transparency for America's biggest asset, land. The reality is land data and access is very fragmented. There's a lot of data. If you're thinking about the pre-built land environment, that's for us. We started very much in the AgLand space, and then we've expanded to everything from aggregates and mining firms to data centers, energy firms, anybody that acquires and manages large pieces of land, raw land. So data and ease of access is the other piece to this. So when we built Acres, AcreTrader was about 4 years in. they had raised about $350 million in fractional investments in farmland. So when I joined, really, this wasn't even a business. We had Acre Trader, and there's a parent Inc. company. Acre Tech Inc. is the parent. And I joined to build Acre Maps as a sister company, a subsidiary company. We started as really wanting to solve one problem for Acre Trader. They were investing in about 6 different softwares to make the decisions: do we invest in this farm or not? And so they saw this as a business opportunity, and that's really where we started. So Acre Trader started in about 2017. They were getting lots and lots of interest, both on the farm side. So it's a farm partner. So most of you are probably aware of the succession issue in agriculture. You have a dad or a granddad that wants to retire. Well, there's 10 grandkids and one of them wants to farm. Well, how do you capitalize that farm? Farming is an incredibly capital intensive industry. The land being the primary aspect of that, right? It's going to be 80 to 85% of the asset value of that farm. So how does that one grandkid, go come up with $4 or $5 million to buy the farm out? They can't. I mean, a bank's not going to lend to them. And so Acre Trader steps in and says, okay, well, let's use your equity in this property as your stake. We will give you a long-term lease. So you're the one farming it. You get first right of refusal to buy it back from us. And then we will go capitalize the rest of the buyout. So if they've got $500,000 in equity, Acre Trader goes to the public market, our clients, and they will invest in shares of roughly $10,000 to $20,000 a pop. And so we'll capitalize the rest of that farm. So that's what Acre Trader got really good at. Has now done nearly $500 million in assets financed that way. Over 150 farms nationwide. We've got a lot here in Indiana, a lot in Illinois, a good deal in the Mid-South, and even permanent crops out west. So we're very diverse in that sense. And so it was a very interesting ride up front. We then got into the brokerage business. So you're constantly having to innovate. So Acre Trader was pretty simple in the sense, like, simple concept, hard to build still. And then we moved and said, well, hey, we're paying lots of brokerage fees. Maybe we should have an ag brokerage. So we did that and then realized pretty quickly, this is a bad idea. Very fragmented, very, very difficult to stay alive in the ag brokerage space. Got in over our head, and we closed that business down. And so then there's Acres, or Acre Maps. Back in the day, we built as a tech firm to help primarily go prospect new farms, value those farms, and then manage those farms. So that was our initial value proposition. And so what we built was the early ROI drivers, I would say, was just nationwide parcel data. It was very, very up to date. So we're more up to date than any other platform like this on the market. And so from there, we built lots of insights around that. The elevation data in the Midwest, you need your soil productivity indices. We use NDVI year over year, not within year, because what we care about is year over year variability, not within year variability. We don't care about yield optimization so much as where are the weak spots on this farm that are consistently weak, where we can't really improve it beyond what it is without a big investment. And last but not least, comparable sales data. So this is where I got to learn a lot. So when I joined at this stage, we were building lots of data sets, and I was excited. I had more data access than I'd ever had in my academic career ever. And so I started building models, all sorts, random forest models, automated valuation models of all sorts. And what we found pretty quickly is that didn't matter to our clients. That wasn't their pain point. They just wanted good data where they could make the decision on the value, especially outside of like Illinois and Indiana. You can get pretty close. This land sales are pretty homogenous. Whereas if you go to the Mid-South, it varies dramatically. And so we realized that the core pain we were trying to solve was not going to be with data science, which is what I thought I was going to do. So it's a very, very interesting learning phase. So I'll show you a quick, see if it'll open from here. If not, let me just click over here. This was Acres when I started. This big spreadsheet. So 4 years ago, these were all the layers and how hard we thought it would be to build and put it in. And that was Carter's our CEO. So we call it Carter's Big List. And we were just sort of working off of this document for the first 6 months until we had a live environment. And I mentioned comparable sales. I moved from trying to build AVMs on mass large quantities of courthouse data to getting really high quality sales data. And to do that required the boring work. And most of you, if you're doing research, you probably find that the data gathering and validation and merging and wrangling into a panel data set is the hard part, right? Once you have the panel data set, you can run 1,000 models, right? Especially now. And you can run 1,000 models and get all the metrics you need to know which one is the best fit. But it doesn't work well if you don't have good data on the front end. And so we spent a lot of time doing what I would call boring work of gathering comparable sales data, curating a very manual data set. And so we still use this to this day. We scour thousands of websites for updates on comparable sales. And the difference in this and what you get at the county assessor is that you're going to get all the auction information. What is the broker fee? What kind of maps? Do they have not just FSA boundaries, but do they have the CRP information? Do they have WRP information? Stuff that the county is never going to give you, but that's very important when you go to value that property. And so over the past 3.5 years since we started building this, we've probably got 50,000 hand-drawn comparable sales. Very boring, very tedious, but incredibly valuable to our client. So now let's look at Acres today, which is quite different than, I guess I should share this tab on here. There we go. So I mentioned that we've moved, those are outside of ag. We started in ag with really those three things. We solved that core pain point, but then you start to scale the market, you get good market share, and you realize, okay, if you get 30% of the AgLand market and the business is there, that's great. You can always do more. But for the amount of money and time I would spend to get 1 or 5% more in that market, I could go take another vertical. We could go into mining, for example, or we can go into retail. Retail buys lots of raw land, and they have a lot of money to spend. So we started thinking that way. But just to stick to the ag concept, let me take you on a quick tour of what that looks like today. Lots of data engineering behind the scenes here to do fuzzy and full text matching and searching. So Summit Ag is a very large farm owner and farm manager over in the Iowa region. And this is really the Acres interface today. So any data you need to get a very quick value of that property. Our goal is to get our clients not to the final value they're going to sell the property for, but to get them to a quick yes or no in many cases. Am I going to use this property? Do I want to prospect this property or not? Or if I do want a quick value, I can get it. But from there, a lot of people are using us for prospecting. So I want to see everything this person owns everywhere across the country. I'm not used to using this on a trackpad. So you can come in and see all the mortgages they have. You can see all of their, in this case, all the parcels that are tucked into that mortgage, the acreage. Some of them will have interest rates, the transactions, so you can back out the loan value ratio. You can really get a good picture. Think of it kind of like the Bloomberg terminal for land ownership and transactions. And so a lot of our, particularly the lenders, this is very interesting because they're having to map collateral. So they want to see, okay, if I want to give a loan to this person, how many other loans do they have? How much land do they have? How much collateral could they offer up? Maybe they're over levered and I don't want to do business, and I can make a quick decision to move on to my next prospect instead of continue to invest in the research there. So that's our networking map. And then, again, sold land mortgages. We have a mini GIS here with thousands of layers that are used for all sorts of things, both ag, home builders, developers, you name it. So wanted to give you a quick picture of what I'm talking about as we go through this today. So this is something I really didn't understand when I joined Acres and started building this data team. So I started by building a data science and data engineering team. We scaled to about 8 within the first year. And I realized very quickly that most of my time was no longer in code and it was no longer modeling. It was figuring out what to get people to work on. And the number of decisions I had to make on a daily basis was far too many for the data that I wanted to have to make those decisions. And so learning frameworks from the business dramatically sped that up and made it easier. We still get things wrong, right? The reality is you have to make decisions. You can't wait for all the data to come. You just got to move. You've got to execute. And so having a couple of frameworks to say no, right? What are we strategically choosing to be as a business? What should we invest in? What should we not? It makes it a lot easier when I get 10 requests from a client. Hey, I really want you to build this thing over here. Now I have something that says, well, we could go do that, but really as a business strategically, we need to be here because that's where we see the most value. Those quick no's or automatic no's have become an integral part, I would say, of my job and my role, both on the data side, but expanding to the product side. So we set quarterly OKRs, and generally we set an annual set of objectives and key results. So OKRs were developed by Google in the early 90s by John Doerr and a group of other folks. I put the link up here. I can share that out later. Whatmatters.com. Highly recommend it. Like if I ever get back into academia, I would manage every research project using the same framework. It's great for personal development and goals. As an academic, I felt like I had to say yes to everything, just all the time. You got more grants, more research. But I think that I could have been more effective and more productive and probably happier about my work in some cases if I just said, what is my goal for the next year, and recenter on that objective and how I want to measure my success against it. It gives you an excuse to say no to something that you might not care that much about, but you feel beholden to do. So in our case, on a quarterly basis, the leadership team gets together and we define the what and the why. So the why is more of an annual thing. So what are we going to do over the next year? Who do we want to be? So I mentioned we were in AgLand and now we're moving into other spaces, data centers and energy, for example, or home builders. Well, they need a different set of tools. It needs to look and feel a bit different. Marketing changes, and it takes time. So we determined the why for that. Why do we want to do that? Well, the verticals are bigger. The time that we're going to invest over the next few quarters is going to pay much bigger returns than if we focus that same effort on getting more of the ag space, as an example. And then from there, we go to the team. And the team is on the key results side. How are we going to measure success? How do we know that we're actually succeeding at moving towards that objective or that new goal? And then in many, many cases, we'll get even halfway through a quarter and realize this was wrong. This is the wrong objective. This is the wrong way to measure success against this objective. Or in a few cases, I've set key results that I thought we had the ability to measure, and then we didn't. And so you get halfway through and you're like, well, okay, I really wanted to see how many enterprise users are engaging with this specific feature. And then you realize, well, we're going to have to go do a bunch of analytics work on the engineering side just to unlock the ability to measure it. Is it worth the engineering time to go do that? And so we'll often have to adjust or adapt from there. So in this case, these are some example OKRs where our longer term objective might be to scale the data moat. That's really important for us. So comparable sales is the sort of OG data moat at acres, and then layers now, which is thousands and thousands of very up-to-date zoning and future land use codes and things like that. Keeping those up to date and covering the entire market is really where we want the data moat to go. So those are just some examples of how we measure against it now. And then just day-to-day decisions in general, especially on the engineering side, there's an insane amount of path dependency, right? And so some things are one-way doors, meaning you go through it, you better know it's the right door because you can't come back through it. So what you choose as a tech stack is an important one. What kind of database are you going to use? Because if you choose Postgres now or some other database, and then you decide in 6 months, well, we want to change. You can, but it becomes very, very expensive to make those changes. And so those I would call one-way doors, and the consequences are irreversible or too costly to reverse with the time that we have as an early stage business. And so again, this is not new to us either. We didn't develop this method. I think this one technically came from Bezos or somebody over at Amazon. But it's a really great way every day to think about Can I let my team make this decision, or should we have a broader discussion? That's a big thing. So we've got about 65 people at Acres now. I manage the tech org, which is about 35, and that's half engineering. That's about 10 data scientists, and that's about 8 people on the product and design team. And so you can imagine the sequencing of work. You got to have product define the requirements, and then that goes to design. Design has to be done before engineering can work on it. Back end and front end have to be in sync. Are there security concerns that have to go through our site reliability team? So there's just a lot of complexity in deciding what to build. But by having one-way doors and two-way doors, it's okay if we get some of those things wrong, because it still costs us money. We don't want to get it wrong, but the quick ability to go back and just say, okay, we're going to nix that feature, or we're going to adjust it and go this other direction. Just let the team make it. As a CTO, I don't need to be involved in every decision about every feature that gets built. But what I do want to know is that we're not making database changes or code stack changes that are affecting our hiring and retention. So that's a big one now. So think about the tech world is changing radically fast with AI. But even before that, it's always changed fast. So Rust has become a very big, prominent direction for back-end engineers. So when you think about Rust, it is a better technology, and we're slowly moving a few things to it. But you have to be really careful, because there aren't that many Rust engineers out there. So if we change our whole back-end over to Rust, well, what if one engineer leaves? Can we fix it if it breaks? Can we hire somebody without paying them $500,000 a year? Those are the questions that require that one-way door analysis. And sometimes it actually is worth it to go ahead and take the leap, and sometimes it's not, or you don't have enough information to make that call. In our case, it really is about speed. It's okay to get a lot of things wrong if you get a few things right. It's the way that I would frame it, and this helps think through those things. How big's the impact? How much effort is it going to be to reverse it? And then how much planning or decision, who needs to be involved in the decision is ultimately where you're coming down to there. So then how do you actually decide what to do or not do? And you've felt this almost certainly doing research, right? There's always that extra model you could run. There's that extra set of data that you could go get to help answer this question or solve this problem. But really, there's an infinite number of things that you could do. And it's about the few things, figuring out the few things you can do. That's the most important thing that I do, I would say, every day. Figuring out what is valuable. If I'm going to spend one more hour of time or one more dollar on something, what's going to generate the most value from that? Sometimes that's right now, and sometimes that's later. I was talking with, it's not all just pure revenue. All revenue is not the same. Most people I didn't understand this at all. So I wouldn't expect most people to, but particularly in a company like ours where we're venture backed, right? So if you're backed by anybody, even a bank to some extent, they're going to ask questions about these things. So do you have monthly revenue, or do you have annual revenue? Is it enterprise revenue, or is it just B2C revenue? Because there's different levels of risk associated with each of those. They're not valued the same at the business level. So in our case, more revenue is always better than no revenue. But if I have to put my dollar into monthly revenue feature, or an annual revenue feature, or an enterprise revenue feature, I will pick the enterprise revenue feature every time. And the reason for that is that the multiples for the value of the business are different. And when I say that, it's that if you're backed by somebody financially, it's highly likely they want a return. They're not just investing because they like you, right? They want the return on the business. So if you take all your monthly revenue, you got $1 million in monthly revenue, you might get $3 million back in business value for that. Annual revenue that's still B2C is going to be a lot better, but still probably 5 to 8x. So $1 million is going to be 5 to 8 million. Enterprise revenue, 10x to 20x, right? So when I think about how to prioritize new features and who we're building for, even if it costs more up front and we're going to sink extra time and money, the long-term marginal value of that, not just in annual revenue, but to the business value, is much, much higher than what it looks like on paper. And so we spend a lot of time prioritizing features. And that's most of my job, is figuring out sitting on sales calls, sitting with the marketing team and understanding our target market and the solutions that we need to build, and then going to the engineering team and figuring out how long it's going to take us to get there. And we do this with hundreds and hundreds of features on a monthly basis. How much effort, how much value, how much effort, how much value. It's just as fast as we can make that decision, we make it. The next piece is even when you decide on a new feature, so comparable sales is a very good example. And it's a great example of when we said no, right? I've built some automated valuation models that probably could work in a few places, but it took quite a lot of effort. We never put it in the front end of Acres. Even though like we could have, it probably would have generated some revenue, but at the end of it, we built the database, everybody started using it. And so that became a nice to have. They weren't, us adding that AVM model was not going to make us more money. It wasn't going to really bring new clients. It would make our current clients happy. Maybe they expand their contract value a little bit, but they're not really, it's not going to make us that much money compared to say, let's add mortgage data, which is what we did instead. And the mortgage data opened up an entire new segment of the market for us for the same amount of effort it would have taken to launch that automated valuation model. And so it's also iterative growth. Just you launch fast. Even I often push our engineers, even if they find bugs in our staging environment, I have them launch. Let the users tell us it's broken. And it's uncomfortable, but let them tell us. And you know what I've often found? We sometimes care about things that our users will never care about. And so let them tell you how important that bug is. No software is ever going to be perfect either. So you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good in these cases. So launch really fast, gather feedback. So if you think one of the other things, a mistake I think we've made in many cases in our design, we have a very simple interface. You don't have to have any technical background to use it. No GIS, none of that. But we made this choice early on to sort of give users options, right? Okay, well, maybe they want to ask this question, so they need a different drop-down box, or they need some toggles. And we didn't realize early on, looking back now, we're fixing some of this. But we made the decision to give the user all the options, give them the panel of filters and buttons and everything they want. And we should have gathered feedback on whether that was the right thing to do, or we should have just launched the very first one button at a time, measured and iterated more quickly to see what would happen. So talked through some of this already, but really the product team, their job is this, right? I mean, on one side, you've got engineering, and on the other side, you've got business. And sales is always going to forward sell. They're going to sell things that you haven't built yet, and it's going to be frustrating. I've been on those calls. And, it can be very uncomfortable to go back to a client and say, we're not actually going to have that on time or maybe at all. Luckily, we did away with some of that. We made a lot of mistakes doing that early on. But you get stretched. And that's where this like cross-functional work becomes incredibly, it's what I found I like. It's very stressful, but it's what I like. I still like to get in the code at times, but in general, what I found I like is like working across these teams to solve this puzzle. How fast can we get this thing built that we know adds value? What do we need for marketing, for product, engineering, design, and sales to make all of this work? And then measuring and optimizing performance. The big thing I'll call out here, and I think this ties into some of for those of you that are in grad school and looking at careers down the road, and you're considering industry as an option, product management is very different than project management. Project management ends. You have a research project, here's what I'm going to do. Now you can turn it into a product, right? And hopefully you do with your research, right? There's always something, there's some new questions, some new data, some new analysis you want to do. Treat it more like product. But when you're talking in your resume or your CV or online and you're going out there to look for jobs, talk about product. Because that is going to be more important to a business, that you know how to execute against a continuously changing, very iterative set of features. If you're in the tech space, I can't speak to anything outside of tech, but in the tech space, talk in product management terms. It's not terribly different, except that there is a lot more iteration and very rapid motions. So this looks very linear. It isn't. But you start with the mission of your business. you get your strategy and your OKRs together, and then you build these quarterly roadmaps and you execute. But the feature build life cycle, this is really what product is like. And so you can even think about research in this way, right? You have your idea, you start to think about the technical effort and all the data. The value proposition is a little different for you, but instead of business value, it might be a specific target journal that you're trying to publish in or something like that. But you're doing a lot of the same things. And I think that's an important thing to consider if you're going to go into industry. Take your research and frame it like this. Hey, I've done all of this. I've operated in a capacity where I could ideate on a problem. I could come up with the data, the effort, all the other people. Hey, I was missing a skill set. In academia, sometimes, at least for me, I was hesitant. You don't want to say you don't know something. You don't want to say you need somebody else to help with a project. In business, it's expected. You better be able to say that because you can't do it all. And so being able to say, hey, I went and I found a co-author over at a different university and we started a collaboration. This is what we were able to do together with my data and my idea and their skill set. That cross-functional collaboration can be really reinforcing to somebody like me. And I've got some more stuff on what to do if you're looking at industry, but yeah, prioritize and then build and iterate. So then product market fit. This is the last slide I have in this section, which is, it's important because there's not one. Like I think we achieve product market fit for the level we aspire to in the ag vertical. And there's more room to grow. We still do grow. But you hit these points where you're like, man, like our returns are not continuing to be as good as they were. They're still growing, but for the amount we're investing in this, we got to find something else. And so product market fit is not a static thing that you like get to and maintain. It's something that requires really active innovation, whether that's a new vertical or up vertical. Maybe you're going upstream and in whichever direction you want to. It's going to look more like this, and really, I would say maybe more like this. It feels like you drop below in some cases. So I've talked a little bit about this, but I think this is true in academia as well, right? Like some of my favorite research projects, probably the most impactful research projects that I ever did. Probably my favorite paper. I published a paper in Nature Communications on climate change impacts on wheat yields in South Africa. And it required going to a bunch of research stations in South Africa, getting Excel documents from a 15-year period, all different formats. There's no code that's going to just magically make all that work. And so manually joining and filtering and massaging all those trials into a single data set and then meshing that with the climate data, that's the value. I thought the model was and the results were, but the value is in pulling all that amazing data into a useful format. And I undervalued that aspect as an academic. So, in our case, the first thing was the comparable sales data. But it's also just building scarce data sets, because generally it's hard because it doesn't exist anywhere else. And nobody else wants to do it. It's too painful to do it. Nobody wants to do data entry. But the reality is when you do data entry, it unlocks a lot of value. And it gives you this structural advantage. So you can do faster R&D, you can do downstream features. So now one of the things that we've gotten really good at, so I mentioned, we have this nationwide parcel data set, we have nationwide comparable sales, and we update that very regularly. So we now have two, what we call index products. So we've gotten very good at entity tracking. So we have a data center index project where we track the top 10 data center companies and where they're buying. And so when Meta or Amazon or Google or Microsoft buys 250 acres outside of some random town, I just saw they announced one today that we picked up a couple months ago in Arkansas, in a podunk town called Clarksville. There's a research station there. But they just bought, I think it's Meta that just bought a 250 acre lot. They're going to build a data center there. Well, having foresight on that. So when they buy a property, we can identify which LLCs are buying, because they don't buy everything under the name Meta, right? So it takes a lot of manual research to go figure out, well, who are all the LLCs associated with not just Meta, but all of Meta's land acquisition teams specifically. And it looks very different state by state. But you don't do that with an algorithm. You don't start with an algorithm. You start by manually collating that data set, and then you build an algorithm on top of it so that every month we pick up, hey, that entity just purchased a property over here. Well, if you know that Meta is buying a data center here, who wants to know that? Just about everybody now. And so we started building that about 1.5 years ago and launched it this year. It took over 1 year to really build a good tracking system. We do the same thing with commercial home builders. Now we capture about 90% of the commercial home builder market. So if you can see where Lennar is buying land, well, that's valuable for a lot of people. It's valuable as competitive intelligence for Lennar or Pulte or one of the other groups. It's also incredibly valuable for Walmart, right? Or just about anything. I mean, McDonald's cares, Dollar General cares. And so, but it took, and I have to say, like when you're building these things, the first 6 months feels terrible because you don't know if the value's there. You're just, doing this data entry and forcing people to do things they really don't want to do. But you get that first contract that's 6 or 7 figures. That's worth it. But it takes a lot of time to build processes and protocols and things that are boring, but really important and really valuable. So thinking about career investment, what are the things that I look for? I mean, on my team, I'm probably a little bit different than most. So I failed out of college my first go round. That's how I ended up in ag development. I spent about 1 year in Thailand before I came back to college and ultimately did a PhD. But I hire people that flunk out and I hire PhDs. I don't hire a ton in the middle because you get a chip on your shoulder either way. If you fail out and you come and want to work with me, there's a reason. And you're probably willing to do some of the hard stuff that nobody else wants to do because you want the experience. Same is true for a number of PhDs. If they're coming to industry from academia, they generally have something they want to prove. And I like that. So what are the things that I would say are important? I think translating your skills. So research naturally comes in that, tied into that product feature lifecycle. Like go do a little bit of research with Gemini or ChatGPT or something and help give it your research and have it, hey, turn this into a product management framework that I can use as part of my CV or my resume if I go apply for jobs, excuse me. I think one big consideration is role readiness. Like what kind of role are you ready for? And what kind of business? I mean, working at Acres is not for the faint of heart. And I tell people that, like, if you get an interview and your top 5 questions is like work-life balance, it's a no. Like it's not that I don't have a life outside of work. I've got 2 kids. I deer hunt, I fish, I do things outside of work, but I work a lot and we all do. We're building a business. There's nothing about it that's balanced. I mean, there's nights, there's weekends, and in software, that's probably even more true. So in ag tech, it may not be quite as harsh in some cases. Like if you go work on the data science team at Bayer, for example, you're not building a software that lives and breathes every day that people are using, and that you get a call from somebody at 7 p.m. and they're like, hey, something's broken and you need to fix it. Sometimes that's true, but something to think about. Are you software oriented or not? Software is going to be a lot more intense from that perspective of just you can't let things fail. There's not, somebody's going to be reaching out after hours or on a weekend. It's the nature of the beast. The other thing here is early versus mature companies. I'm obviously really early stage. I've got very close friends that are data scientists in large corporations. I work with lots of data scientists and data engineers at large corporations that buy data from us. It's more stable. It's probably easier to get a higher level role in some cases at one of those firms. But once you're there, you learn a lot less fast. That's what I've seen for the most part in the tech stack and with new methods, specifically in data engineering. So think about that. It's not that there's one that's right or wrong. It's just what do you want in your career? Do you want to go chase something that's Are you okay with putting up with a lot of change and iteration and you want to learn really fast? Or do you want that stable sort of, okay, I know exactly what's expected of me. A bigger company is going to be able to give that. I mean, in my role, again, started with data science and data engineering. I absorbed product. I then absorbed design. For about a year, I managed growth marketing, which is mostly analytical. And that was a lot of fun, but it also was like, I don't really want to do this. And luckily I was able to hand that off to somebody else and then took over engineering. But that's what I like. I like new problems to solve, learning new things, even if I ultimately hand them off. So think about what you want, I think, is the key there. So specific skills, if you want to get into the nitty gritty of tech skills, get to know a terminal. Use Bash, ZSH, just get to know a terminal. You don't need to know everything, but just spend some time learning how to navigate your applications and your computer from a terminal. That's something I wish I'd learned a long time ago. It's not even that hard. I mean, really, if you spend a month where you're just like, anytime I open a document, anytime I open an application, I'm going to do it from my terminal. If you commit to that for a month, you'll be a wizard. Everybody will think you're a wizard. It's really not that hard, but like they'll think you're a wizard. And alongside that, like I didn't realize, I spent most of my time in Python and R and things like that. But ZSH, Bash, and Shell, when you go straight to that terminal language, you can turn something into a script with AI, write your Python script, turn it into a ZSH or Bash script using AI. It will be about 30 times faster on average than what you're running in Python, because it's just running it straight on bare metal. It's not interpreting anything. So highly recommend getting to know the terminal, manage everything in GitHub, and not just like the ability to push and pull and have a repository, have branches. Figure out how to branch with your co-authors when you're working on projects. That skill is I can't state highly enough. That's a huge thing when I interview somebody. They have to have some of those base skills in GitHub. You won't see any Python or anything or data science skills right here, because I think the data engineering space now is where data science was 10 years ago. So data science 10 years ago, there's still a lot to figure out. There's still new methods coming out, but it was really hard, right? Like you go get a new library and everybody waited, they salivated for that next machine learning package or econometric package to come out. But now it's not so hard to access it. There's a lot of information and easy to go implement lots of those models. Data engineering, now our data is a lot bigger. It's in a lot more places. It's in a lot more formats. How do you organize that data, store that data, especially when you can't use it locally? Like we've got petabytes now, far outside of what we could do on a local machine. So how do you store it efficiently and cheaply in our case? So like we spend, we spend roughly having some base skills. I'm not saying you need to be the guy that's managing all the cloud costs, but understanding how to access a Google Cloud bucket or an AWS bucket, how to use remote compute to analyze data sets, and understanding, okay, raw data is here. You don't ever touch the raw data again. Every transformation goes somewhere else so that you've got full provenance all the way back to that first data set that came in. Most of our like nightmarish problems have come where we dropped the ball somewhere and missed a transform step and that we can't find. We got the raw data, and then we've got our final data, and maybe we've got a few transformations where we're missing one critical step. Those are the hard things to debug, and they can also really be detrimental to software. So learn some relational database stuff, learn some NoSQL, so like text-based stuff, which is what most LLMs are built on, vector databases. There are some pretty easy tools to get familiar with now, and use AI for it, but definitely get to understand schemas and what ACID transactions are. There's some basic data engineering things that are a lot more important than I realized early on. And then also, whether you're data engineering or data science, know when to come back out of the rabbit hole, right? Like there are infinite things you can do. You can always run another model, but is it worth it? Like that's the question. Even my data engineers, I have to ask that. Okay, like they're often chasing efficiency now. How much faster can I make it? How much cheaper can I make it? It's like, Great. You got from 10 seconds to 5 seconds. I don't care. You spent a week doing it, which cost me way more money than what I just got back. So know when to come back out of that rabbit hole, like when it's worth it. I do tell my guys, generally, you should spend 10 to 20% of your week in the rabbit hole. I want you innovating. I want you doing things that are maybe, they always need to be tangentially tied to those OKRs or business objectives. But it's okay to take leaps, because that's also where you get step functions ahead. And so there's a hard balance there. It's not always clear how far or not down the rabbit hole you should go.